My name is Nancy Marcus, and I graduated from Case Western Law School in 1997. So I had grown up in Memphis, Tennessee, and had gone to college in Maryland and Michigan. And I ended up at Case Western in '94. They offered a generous scholarship thanks to generous alumni who make those kinds of things possible. And I did everything I could in those 3 years to keep earning the scholarship while I was there. But I'm very grateful that that's where I ended up in law school. I think I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I did have a hard choice to make between music and the law, but ended up choosing the law. I was very civil rights oriented, which wasn't typical for a lot of my classmates. Case Western, of course, offers a great pipeline to Jones Day and other big firms, and I was kind of on this different social justice, civil rights track. But I immediately got the support that I needed, including from my professors at Case Western, to let me know that it was just a great fit for me. There were so many opportunities within the city of Cleveland while I was a law student. And even after I left Cleveland and left the Midwest, I've continued to get just incredible support from my mentors, among my past professors at Case Western, who really made my career, successful because of their support. So my career path has had all kinds of fun twists and turns. It's not a typical, not that there is such a thing as a typical legal career, but I've had some great adventures. So I started off as a legal aid lawyer in the Appalachian foothills of southeastern Ohio, and did legal work for a couple of years. I went to DC basically to try to save the world. I did a lot of policy work in DC. I was the state public policy director for the National Abortion Federation for a couple of years. I worked for the National Trial Lawyers Association, fought for President Clinton's judicial nominees on Capitol Hill. And eventually, what I learned from DC after 5 years was I wasn't using enough of the intellectual abilities that I had honed in law school, and I wanted to be more of a critical thinker and speak what I thought was the truth about matters. And I realized what I wanted more than anything was to be a legal academic, was to actually become a law professor. I loved watching my law professors at Case Western. They clearly really loved what they were doing. They were passionate about that law, and that passion really stuck with me over the years. So I ended up going back to law school, getting my second and third law degrees at University of Wisconsin in record time. I got my LLM and SJD in 2 years flat, which had never been done before. And my dissertation was on basically predicting same-sex marriage 10 years before it happened. But it was a very doctrinally geeky dissertation. I basically put the building blocks together doctrinally, looking at equal protection, looking at substantive due process, how the two are intertwined over the years. And I basically predicted, both in the context of reproductive rights and LGBT rights, that this, symbiotic almost double helix of equal protection and due process protections under the 14th Amendment had just gained strength over time, and were the same equal liberty foundations that established a woman's right to choose as established a same-sex couple's right to choose who they love, that these most personal, private decisions are something that are absolutely constitutionally protected. So that dissertation ended up, basically coming true at the Supreme Court level. My dissertation work was used by some litigation groups in their impact litigation to argue that there was a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. And then I ended up working with those same groups as a named legal lawyer for a few years. So I've always been involved in policy work on, really important cutting-edge policy issues, but also very much wanting to use my legal skills as a litigator. So I've always brought theory and practice kind of to the table together. And so I have been a professor over the years, but I've also been an impact litigator, fighting for not just LGBT rights, but also other social justice issues, including police reform and police brutality issues. So I've gone from being a legal aid lawyer to doing policy work in DC to coming back to the academia. And now I'm kind of in a passing the torch mode and helping nurture in the newer generation of lawyers, their own abilities to use their law degrees to fight for issues they believe in to make the world a better place. Honestly, my focus these days really is 100% on my students. I'm continuing to publish. I'm very involved in lots of dialogues through legal scholarship. And so I'm continuing to write about police reform, social justice issues, LGBT rights, and now I'm circling back to reproductive rights because, unfortunately, a lot of the rights that I fought so hard for, in my time in DC and beyond, now we're having to fight for all over again. But that brings me back to um, my love for doctrinal law. I'm not giving up on the fact that the Supreme Court still must be guided to some extent by doctrine. They can't just willy-nilly do whatever they want, as much as it may seem that way sometimes. So now I'm going back, I'm going back to my original dissertation work from, almost 20 years ago and revisiting it and saying, look, here are the foundations. It's not just about substantive due process. It's not just about liberty, but we still have equal protection rights to be in the most private types of relationships that should not be subject to government interference. We still have intimate association rights. Now, all of these rights that doctrinally have developed over the decades by the Supreme Court, I'm continuing to use what power I do have with my pen to remind people, here's how you keep fighting for these rights. You don't give up just because the Supreme Court issued one bad decision striking down Roe. That's not the end. This is just the beginning. It's a matter of the new generation, finding what their tools are, what their, doctrinal arguments can be moving forward, and helping them identify those arguments. When I was at Case Western in 1994 to 1997, when I was a law student, I was a presumptive criminal because I was in a same-sex relationship. And Bowers versus Hardwick was still good law. Lawrence versus Texas hadn't, overturned it yet. I was dating the editor of the Gay People's Chronicle. And, while I was a law student, the Supreme Court issued its first ever positive Supreme Court decision affirming LGBT rights, and that was Romer versus Evans. But I was still a presumptive criminal after that. And yet that really sparked my intellectual curiosity, as well as, emotionally, it was incredibly vindicating, but also, I was scratching my head. Why did the Supreme Court rule in our favor? What does this mean? And so my constitutional law professors at Case Western were really helpful and encouraging as I started putting the pieces together and started seeing, again, the doctrinal basis for what the Supreme Court had done. And I started realizing that, no, just because I may be considered a criminal today because of my same-sex relationship, this is a blip in time. We get to help change this. We did. And the law is not static. And so that's something that I want to convey to students today who are feeling hopeless because we no longer have abortion rights protected across the country by the Constitution. But this is just a blip in time. This is one moment in time. The law evolves, society evolves. The Supreme Court's going to change. This is, I think, an exciting time for the next generation because things are changing and they get to help decide the direction it changes. So instead of feeling hopeless, I really do want to encourage younger lawyers and new law students to realize they're going to be empowered and they're going to be able to make a difference. And this is exciting and this is a challenge and these are good things. It's scary, but they're in a position where they can make a difference in other lives, in their own lives, using the law the way that it should be used. I'm so honored to be inducted to the Venture Society and absolutely tickled. Sometimes this country's too big, and I feel now that I'm in California, I'm so far away from Ohio, and I miss everybody there, and I miss Case Western. So being able to be connected and to be more involved is really an invitation that I'm delighted about, and I'm looking forward to helping however I can as a member of the society. Well, Case Western was not just where I got my JD. I have been connected to Case throughout my career. After I had decided I wanted to join the legal academia myself, my first teaching job was as an adjunct at Case Western. So my former constitutional law professor called me after I had gotten my advanced law degrees, and he knew that I was looking for a law professor job, and he wanted to know if I would be interested in teaching appellate practice as an adjunct. And that was a wonderful experience. I got to teach appellate practice for several years at Case Western before I got my first full-time law professor job. But before and after that, my former professors, especially Jonathan Enton, Mel Derschlag, my constitutional law professors, have always been there 100% by my side, encouraging me, mentoring me as I pursued the legal academia. And even when I was pursuing other civil rights, social justice, impact litigation type jobs, The support that I've gotten from my former professors has just been so constant and so wonderful and strong. And so I'm very, very grateful to Case Western for always encouraging me and seeing my potential, and being in my life throughout my career. So my first year, I lived in University Circle. I lived at the Triangle Towers so I could walk to class. And that was very convenient and fun, and I enjoyed that. But then I explored more of Cleveland after that. There's so much in Cleveland to explore, but I got to know like the Clifton, West Side neighborhoods pretty well, and moved out there. One thing that I really loved is I grew up on classical music. My mother's a classical pianist for a living. So the fact that we had such easy access to Cleveland Symphony concerts, right down the block was just pinch me perfect. That was something that not every law school gets to experience, that Case Western really has. And, the beautiful botanical gardens, the art museum across the street. So I really took advantage of a lot of that, and what very little spare time we had as law students. I appreciated being able to take those breaks to enjoy culture, and I was really honored to get a full merit scholarship to Case Western. So I graduated without any debt other than some living expense money that I borrowed. Without that assistance from Case Western, from the alumni who made that possible, I could not have done public interest law. I couldn't have afforded to. My legal aid lawyer job paid $28,000 a year. So the only way I was able to pursue my real passions and to use my law degree to fight for the little guy and for causes I believed in was because of that merit scholarship. Absolutely. Shout out and huge thanks to my former professors, for to all of my former classmates and all of the members of the Case Western community who continue to make it such a great law school to be proud to be a part of.